Well, hello, really warm welcome to Ambedkar Day this year. My name is Viryananda, and I'm going to start off by thanking all of you for coming, and everyone who brought food. That was a fantastic Indian feast. Very successful Indian feast, part of the program. And I also want to say thank you to the team supporting today, and our speakers in advance, and also everyone who contributed to this amazing, dazzling shrine. So that was Sarah and Rebecca and everyone else in Aryasaki's Mitra group. Yeah. So I think I'll sit down. So just to give you a run through of the program for this afternoon. So I'll be kind of introducing the day, and we'll then hear from a couple of friends before a tea break, and then come back up for the second half. We'll be hearing from a couple more people, and then finishing off with a ritual at 4 o'clock. So that's the kind of structure of the afternoon. Great. So we're here this afternoon to celebrate a great Indian Buddhist of the 20th century, Dr. Ambedkar. And the example of his life and his work for Buddhism, or what he's done for the world, continue to inspire me and many other people within Triratna and across the world. Millions of people today benefiting from what he's done. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to say a bit more about that, because so many people are unaware of Dr. Ambedkar. Even within our movement, many people don't realize that what Dr. Ambedkar did and understood has had a huge effect on the way that Triratna is today, and the way that we understand Buddhism and its significance for our society that we live in. So I'm really glad that we've got this opportunity to share that, and not just to talk about that in an abstract way, but this afternoon I think a very, very special opportunity to hear from 4 members of our own sangha about how it has changed their own lives. This is very much real and alive for us today. So Dr. Ambedkar's birthday was 2 weeks ago on the 14th of April. So the reason why we're having this celebration now is it was the closest Sunday that we could do to the anniversary of his birth. And across the world, particularly in India, this day is a huge celebration of him and his life. So that's why we're having it here today. And I suppose for us in Sheffield, it's also a celebration of our connections with the Triratna Sangha in India. You might not realise that about 1/3 of the order members in Triratna are Indians, and about half of the people in the whole of Triratna are in India. So that is an awful lot of people, and we're all part of the same movement, kind of the same order, with the same understanding of what it means to be a Buddhist. And I really want to kind of celebrate that fact today, and celebrate, well, this is an example of kind of unity of humanity that goes beyond borders and all of the other kind of differences that we get born into. So I think that's a very special thing to celebrate. So that's another part of today. Because it's a wonderful thing to kind of, well, transcend the geographical distance and the cultural divide. And For that reason, today has a particularly Indian feel, which I can see we're already enjoying. Lots of sequins today. And so it's quite customary in the Sangha in India to begin a program like this with a ritual, kind of to frame the whole thing in the context of, our admiration for the ideals of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and also our gratitude for, I suppose, the founder of Triratna, Bhante Sangharashta, and for Dr Ambedkar. So today we're going to begin with a kind of ritual. So I'm going to invite Shubham and Dinesh to place flower garlands around the images of Dr Ambedkar and Sangharashta, as is customary in the Indian Sangha. And then after that, we'll all in unison will chant the refuges and precepts. So if anyone would like to have the words for the refuges and precepts, you could put up your hand and someone can bring those to you. Yeah. Great. Would you guys like to come? Thank you. So the refuges and precepts in unison. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata verimini sikkhapadam samadhyami. Adinadana verimini sikkhapadam samadhyami. Kamesu michachara verimini sikkhapadam samadhyami. Musavada verimini sikkhapadam samadhyami. Suramerya maja Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. With deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. With open-handed generosity, I purify my body. With stillness, simplicity, and contentment, I purify my body. With truthful communication, I purify my speech. With mindfulness clear and radiant, I purify my mind. Great. So I'd like to begin, I suppose, giving a bit more of an introduction about why we're doing this today. Who is Dr. Ambedkar and what has he got to do with us? Why are we here? So I suppose I'll begin a bit more personally. I've already said that about a third of the order in Triratna are in India. And I suppose it's just good to kind of say, well, Shanker, the founder of Triratna, our order and movement, said that contact with Dr. Ambedkar led him to become much more aware of the social dimension of Buddhism, and in fact the social dimension of existence itself. And some people would consider Dr. Ambedkar to have had the greatest impact on Buddhism in the world since the Emperor Ashoka, shortly after the time of the Buddha, because of the fact that in 1956 Dr. Ambedkar converted from being kind of known as an untouchable Hindu to a Buddhist. And he did that along with hundreds of thousands of his followers. And since then, many, many more people have converted to Buddhism. And he's effectively revived Buddhism as a living religion in India today. So that's the scale of the impact of his life. But for me, my first contact with Dr. Ambedkar came here at the Buddhist Center. I'd never heard of him until a day like this a few years ago, Ambedkar Day. And as part of that day, Maitri Dasa had organized a film screening of the biography of Dr. Ambedkar. So that was my introduction. That's how I came to know that. So he was born at the end of the 19th century into Hindu society, and by birth he was an untouchable. So that means within the caste system that's part of Hindu scripture and society, everyone's born into a certain caste community. And this comes with a kind of defined social status, rights and duties and expectations. And well, Dr. Ambedkar later described the caste system as a system of graded inequality. So there are these different sort of levels within the caste system. And as you might guess, the untouchables are right at the bottom of that system. At that time, it was believed that for someone to even touch one of these people was polluting to their being, and they literally would avoid touching people who were born into this caste. So as a boy, Dr. Ambedkar, people wouldn't cut his hair because the barber didn't want to touch him. There's a story about how one day he went with his siblings to stay with some family members, but there'd been some mix-up and no one was there at the train station at the other end to collect them. So although they were children traveling on their own, people found out that they were from this particular caste and people refused to help them. So people were prepared to let helpless children be left alone because of their belief in this system. So going through school was incredibly challenging for him. He wasn't really welcome to sit in the same classroom as the other students, not welcome to drink the same water as the other students, but he was a man of incredible determination and persistence. And to cut a long story short, he was an exceptional student. He became eventually one of the most educated men in all of India. So he was the first person from his community to complete the whole of his schooling, to graduate from high school. He was so bright that he traveled abroad, completed his higher education in America and in London at universities and law school. And when he returned to India, he was probably one of the most educated men in India, despite coming from his particular background. But he continued to face these incredibly difficult social attitudes and barriers. So he was working in a city away from home, and in order to find a lodging to stay, he had to use a different name. But even that didn't work, because eventually people found out what his surname was, and from that they worked out that he was from this untouchable caste, and he was forced out of his accommodation by a mob of people who were so repulsed by this idea that he was an untouchable. But rather than give up, he resolved that he was going to dedicate his life to the freedom and the kind of uplift of himself and his people. He felt very strongly identified with his community and believed that it just wasn't right. Something had to be done about that. So he resolved to do something about that. And he said that although I have been born a Hindu, I will not die a Hindu. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he was going to do something. So he became more and more politically active, organizing campaigns, demonstrations for their rights. Over many years, he did staged all kinds of action, wrote speeches, got more and more involved in the political system in India. And again, he met huge resistance from this dominant Hindu society and people's views and opinions. He wasn't deterred, and through his kind of exceptional intellect and determination, he was actually instated as a law minister for the Indian cabinet. He was involved in several policies to create more equal rights, equal opportunities for people of his caste. And he actually, when it came to the time of Indian independence in the 50s, he did most of the work in drafting the constitution for India, which is still in place today. But in the end, the fierceness and the persistence of the opposition to his reforms, trying to uplift these marginalized people, just led him to resign from the cabinet. Because what he observed was that although he's given so many speeches, passing bills in Parliament, debating for change, he realized that people weren't really prepared to change their attitudes. And I think his great insight was about how change in society actually works. So I suppose what he saw was that change comes from deeper than just a policy and a law. Change comes from when people change their hearts and minds. And I'm really passionate that we get to sort of share this insight today, because I think it's true not only in India in the 1950s, but I think it's true for any society anywhere. And, you know, I'm someone who was definitely interested in what Buddhism can do for society when I came along here as part of a sangha. And I feel that Dr Ambedkar has really understood what that can be. So, despite all of his political and social activism, there wasn't a significant improvement to how people were treated. So there was some change in the term. So we have this term Scheduled Caste, which refers to what were kind of marginalized and depressed classes. The untouchable peoples are known as Scheduled Caste people. But there wasn't much change to how they were treated because the same underlying views and attitudes still existed in society at that time. So he saw that the way we behave and the way that we relate to each other comes from what we believe about them, about ourselves. So it comes from our minds. So therefore, you can't reform society unless you reform the minds of the individual people who make up that society. He said that the emancipation of the mind and soul is a necessary preliminary for the political expansion of the people. Changing one's own mind opens up a new way of identifying, a new way of relating to yourself that inspires dignity, self-respect, and confidence that's coming from within. And changing one's attitude towards other people opens up a new relationship with them, and this can create a new society. That was his vision. So he recognized that a functioning democratic society needs its foundation in the hearts and the minds of each individual. And therefore, it needs to kind of come from really deep. It needs a spiritual basis or a moral basis. So he said religion, in the sense of morality, must therefore remain the governing principle in every society. He really understood that religion was not a bonus thing, but it was actually essential to the happiness and the kind of the way individuals relate to each other. So he conducted a very reasoned survey of all of the different religions, and he settled on Buddhism as being the only religion that meets the demands of the modern world. So he had admired the Buddha from an early age. He'd come across the Buddha's teachings, and he felt a kind of personal devotion and faith in the Buddha. But his reason for choosing Buddhism were foremost that its moral code, the 5 precepts, recognizes these fundamental social qualities of individual liberty, equality between people, and fraternity or democracy. And Buddhism also accords with reason. It's sort of fully in agreement with science and rational understandings. And it doesn't in any way condone poverty or inhumanity. So such a religion could be taken up and practiced by individual people and form the basis of a stable democratic society. So that was his vision. So he went for it, and on the 14th of October in 1956, he publicly renounced Hinduism and became a Buddhist. So he took the same refuges and precepts that we've all just chanted, and then he turned to a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people who were gathered in Nagpur, and he passed on the refuges and precepts, and in so doing, his followers were converting to Buddhism and saying, I no longer identify as an untouchable. I am a Buddhist. I have been born again. And this was the greatest event that's happened for Buddhism in hundreds of years, because it kind of died out as a living religion in India. And so this was the spark of something of sort of huge significance in Buddhist history. And for those individuals who converted, it felt like, well, people said, I feel as though I've been freed from hell. I feel as though I've been born again. And this huge uprising of sense of liberation, of sense of joy, sense of happiness. People were kind of, I suppose they now had an ideal in the Buddha of what their humanity could become, and they felt like empowered to really take up their birthright as human beings. So unfortunately, it wasn't happily ever after from the time of the mass conversion, because just 7 weeks after that, Dr. Ambedkar died. So it's quite likely that he'd almost literally worked himself to death. He'd given himself so much to this conversion movement. It's like he had almost nothing left. And his death was a huge shock to his followers. So many people, so many of these new Buddhists really were afraid that all of the momentum of the conversion was going to collapse, because although they were Buddhists by name, there wasn't much understanding of what it really meant to be a Buddhist, how to really live and practice as one, how to keep the momentum of this revolution going. Something of a miracle happened around that time, and that is part of the story of how Triratna came to be connected with Dr. Ambedkar and this Dharma revolution. So it just happened that as a news of his death was spreading around, and a lot of confusion and fear at that time, Sangha arrived in Nagpur, which is where the conversions had happened. So Sangha had been living in India for over 15 years by then, studying Buddhism from various different teachers and getting a very deep understanding and practice of what it meant to be a Buddhist. And during that time, he'd actually met up 3 times with Dr. Ambedkar and, was a great supporter, a great believer in what he was doing. So it came to be that the Bhante arrived in Nagpur just at this time of crisis and confusion, and he responded. Over the next few days, he gave talk after talk after talk to the new Buddhists, these followers, really encouraging them and saying, look, okay, your leader has died, but you can continue his work. You need to stand up, you need to have confidence, you need to carry on what he believed in, what he started. And having returned to London and established Triratna as a Buddhist movement in the UK, in the late 70s, Sangha sent some of the order members back to meet contacts who he'd met, friends he'd made in India. And what they found was that although the conversion movement was still going, there was still not very deep understanding about what it really meant to be a Buddhist. So people from our movement were able to really give something at that time and help give these new Buddhists a confidence in their own practice and an understanding of what it meant to be a Buddhist. So even now, there are so many different Buddhist groups among the former untouchable community. But I've heard it said with great confidence that among them, Triratna Buddhists are the ones that really understand the meaning of the Dharma. We might hear a little bit more about that. So that's a kind of short version of how Triratna and Dr. Ambedkar came to be linked today. And I'm really happy that, several of my friends in this room are people who very much here because of what Dr. Ambedkar has done. So I'm going to invite to the stage Shubham and Dinesh. I suppose I'll start with Dinesh. So the reason we met is because 4 years ago, I attended the International Buddhist Youth Convention, which was organized by Triratna in India. And it was a sort of a gathering of young Buddhists from, mostly from India, and a very small number not from India. And really, we had nothing in common whatsoever, apart from our deepest ideals. And we really connected with that. And so now you're here in Sheffield studying a master's. And Dinesh just told me over lunchtime that he's the first person in his family to be studying higher education, the first person in his family or even his village to go outside of India to study higher education. And similarly, I went back to the Buddhist Youth Convention last year, and that's where I met Shubham. And Well, you know what? He's now studying a master's in Sheffield. So, yeah, if you could join me on the stage.
Jai Bhim, guys. What do you want? Both the chairs? Okay.
Great. So maybe I'll start with you, Shubham. Could you say a bit about how you and your family came to be involved with Triratna?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks. First of all, I'm really glad that I'm here in Sheffield. I never imagined that I do my masters in other country because I've never been outside my city in my entire life. So yeah. So how my family came in contact with Triratna. So I'll start with this. When the mass conversion happened and in Nagpur, my grandfather was present there. So yeah, we do have a deep connection since that time with Buddhism. And then it started with they only knew just few pujas and rituals about Buddhism and no deeper knowledge or any text of what the Buddhism really is and what it can do to their lives. It just my grandfather and my grandparents and my parents.
Can you just put your microphone in the middle of your t-shirt?
Okay. Is it okay now?
That's perfect.
Yeah. So all they knew was just the 5 precepts. I'll just hold this in my hand.
It's because he keeps moving his head, that's why.
There you go.
Talk straight.
Thank you.
Yeah. So all they knew was just the 5 precepts and nothing much more. But what it did to them was only they had at least the basics that the 5 precepts of not harming anyone, not intoxicating anything, not stealing anything from anyone, and like other 5 precepts. So one day, again, my grandfather just visited us from our village, and he was in our town. And then we were like around, maybe I was 4, and I was just walking with him in the afternoon. It was a warm afternoon in India. It was summers, obviously. Now the voice. Okay, I'll not move ahead. Yeah, so it was vacations and he visited us. So one day, randomly, we were just walking on the streets and he just found this statue of Buddha and Ambedkar, and it was one of the Dhammachari back in India who just lived near our house, but we never knew them. So one day we just went there and randomly he just saw the statue and the picture of Ambedkar. And curiously he just asked them like what's going on here. And then that's how we met Dhammachari Siddhisagar. And he just introduced us that we have this foundation called Triratna and every Sunday we have this sangha nights, what we do on Tuesdays here. But they are quite like not similar. Yeah. So the journey began from there. I was like literally born in Triratna since the time I've got into my senses. I was literally doing Sunday Kids morning as in Triratna, and now my sisters are conducting Sunday Kids morning. So it was a big transformation from there to there. And since then, when I was 4, the journey started from there. So every Sunday we went to this center, and the Buddhist centers in India are not like the centers they are back in here or in any Western country or in any developed country. They started in a small house, which was his own house. It was the odd members' house. So every Sunday there were only around 30, 40 people. So since then, 20 years began, and we just became family with a lot of order members, and we grew up together with their kids. They are similar to my age, so it's just like a family. We are brothers and sisters to each other, and aunties and uncles, and continuously the I was not completely into Buddhism. I just knew that this is our religion, and I just accepted it as a religion because I was a kid then. And I was like, yeah, it's just another religion like what Hinduism is practicing, and what Jainism is, what Sikhism is, and this is just another religion, and that's it. And that's India, and we have religions. That's it. And then uh, lots of years passes, and every Sunday I used to go to the centers. Heard a lot of talks, and also did a lot of retreats, but retreats were like vacations for kids there. So we only enjoyed there, nothing much more than that. So yeah, the teachings were already going on indirectly in my head since then. And then in maybe 10 years, 2016, everyone just thought that let's have a center. And we just got a place there, and it was only the teachings of Buddhism that the whole center was constructed by my father without any payment or anything, just generously. And it's not just my father, a lot of people helped each other, and we just found this beautiful center. It's a small center, it's like around, maybe it can accommodate just 100 people, and that's it. But the way it just formed, it's because of the generosity and all the values that Buddhism just provided to each other, and that's how we just began. And my whole family was a mitra like since many years. And whenever anyone used to come to our house, order members or anyone who was Buddhist, they just used to ask me, why are you not a mitra? I was like, I don't feel like becoming a mitra. Like, I know I am a Buddhist and there are a lot of things in Buddhism, but I just don't feel like, I was not ready back then. And then last year I became Mitra because I just thought that this is the time now. And I am here because of Triratna and Buddhism. Because if last year I would have not done IBOIC retreat, I would have not been here anyways. I would have just did my business, I would have had franchising, earned my money, that's it. But I'm here because I had this background of Buddhism, and I had Triratna back in India, and I had Triratna here, and I had a sangha from there, a sangha from here, and people from there. So that's how I just thought that it's time to become a mitra now, and that's why last year I just became mitra.
Yeah, and what about you, Dinesh? Could you say something about how you came into contact with Dr. Ambedkar?
Yes, first of all, hello everyone. Namo Buddhaya, Jai Bhim. Good afternoon. And I feel honored, really. And I'm grateful that you. So, thank you for arranging such a wonderful event. So, yeah, first of all, let me introduce so my name is Dinesh, and I'm from India, Western India, a state called Gujarat. And currently I'm pursuing master's degree at Sheffield University. So yeah, coming back to your question, what?
How did you first come into contact with Dr. Ambedkar?
It's a long story, but let me put it in this way. Like I was since my childhood, I was curious about like why we suffer, why everything is happens. There should be a reason. So I was curious about knowing how universe works, and being born in Hindu family, like I was like reading all the literatures, Hindu scripts, and but I found it did not work. So I was still in search of how like why we suffer, why the tragedies are happening, and why our family, why we. So it's like so it eventually in 2017 I attended a Vipassana retreat. Vipassana. So it's an extreme way of doing meditation, and we need to stay 10 days without any connection of outer world. So I did that, and at that time I experienced this is what I was looking for, and my curiosity ended because of the retreat itself and my experience. Before attending that retreat, I studied some Hindu literatures uh, and some Jainism also. But still, there were questions. But those questions were ended when I attended retreat, and I came in contact. This was my first point. Came in contact with Buddhism, and then I found like jewel. This is what I was looking for, and my curiosity ended. My questions were ended, most of. And then I started looking for community in practical world. Who are the people who practices Buddhism in my city? Yes. So eventually, in 2018, I came in contact on the occasion of birth anniversary celebration in my city. I came in contact with some Ambedkarite people, and on that day, exact 6 years ago,
Yeah.
I came in contact with 2018 on 14th of April. Triratna. It was my first contact with Triratna, and I bought a book called Bodhicharya Avtara. And since then, I remember exactly, I attended 25th of April, first my Dhamma class with Triratna. And there is very few people in my city. They are practicing Triratna, and there is only one Dhammachari. His name is Manjuratna, and he guided me and he inspired me. So since then I've been practicing, and then I read I knew about Dr. Ambedkar before came in contact with Triratna and Buddhism. I knew, but not like in a deeper way what he did, like Viryananda uh, told us his biography, entire biography. And then I started reading his literature. Particularly, I would say Buddha in his Dhamma. He wrote Buddha in his Dhamma book, and I read 2 to 3 times that book. That really changed my perspectives toward life and what the religion is. Like Buddha, he writes like Buddha is like wayfinder. He's not going to save you. He's just showing a way you need to follow. And like I said earlier, I was curious, like why everything is, why I suffer, why why there is tragedy in the world, and there are a lot of questions. Why someone dies? Because I lost my mother when I was a kid. So all that by reading this book, I realized there is it is my own action, my own karma that creates my destiny, my future. Otherwise, earlier I used to believe that there is supernatural power who governs my life. But after reading his literature, particularly like I emphasize on the book Buddha and his Dhamma, it's like our Triratna Sangha. It combines all the tradition of Buddhism. I forgot, like I was talking about attending a retreat, and I, then I was confused. Like there are many branches of Buddhism, a vast literature. Which literature and which branch should I follow? Hinayana, Mahayana, and again I was a bit confused. Where should I go? And but I keep searching, like, and eventually, like I said, I came in contact with Triratna and I started practicing. But still, there were some doubts in my mind. Is the Triratna doing is the Triratna perfect? Like or some other branches also in India, like many branches, the Hinian and many Ambedkarite peoples, they follow Buddhism, but they have all their own perspective and their own interpretation towards Buddhism. Some people follow only Ambedkar and his movement, but they say for the sake of Baba Sahib's uh, vision towards Buddhism, they say we are Buddhists, but you in reality they don't practice Buddhism in their life. So I was like searching and reading all the literatures, and upon reading Buddha and his Dhamma, I got realized that what is the Dhamma and it uh, how it affects our life, day to life, not our life, but how the entire world is like, because we are connected. And I used to believe before that, like I said, there is superpower and who governs my life. But after studying, after reading this book, I came to know that I should be aware about my emotions and my actions, because these my emotions, my actions, and will create my destiny. There is no superpower. So this completely revolutionized my life, and then I read so many other literatures that Dr. Baba Sahib wrote. The one that I read is Who Were the Sudra? Sudra. Sudra means just like Viryananda discussed that some people consider depressed class in a Hindu society. There are hierarchy. Still, it prevails. So you can't. It's like for Baba Sahib Ambedkar, writes like it's a for building for you can, if you born in a lower depressed class, you can't go up. You should you are supposed to die in that particular.
So could you say something about how has Buddhism changed your experience of caste, or what you've seen in your community?
Yeah. So once I came in contact with Triratna, I met Viryananda. I attended in 2020 attended IBYC retreat, and it motivated me. Like I came in contact with different nationalities, which inspires me. And Baba Sahib itself, he faced many difficulties in his life, and even though difficulties and challenges, despite challenges, he managed to do what he wanted to do for marginalized society. So altogether, it worked all together, like Baba Sahib's literature and practicing with Triratna Sangha. I completely changed. But earlier I used to be very angry by nature and negative. So now I completely think differently, positively. And this is Triratna and Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Because of him and Sangha, I am here today. I used to believe that I can't do anything earlier, before came in contact with Buddhism. But since I started practicing Triratna, I ordained as a Mitra in 2019. And I started put those teachings, Buddha's teachings in my life. So it worked, and I realized that how my life is changing. Otherwise, I'm working with government sector. I have a government job. So having a government job in India is like everything. You don't need to do
You've made
anything.
it, yeah.
So like
Yeah.
your future is secured. But even though, and I realized after reading Dr. Baba's life is process, learning. Life, we need to. I need to learn. I can't stick to government jobs and in circle doing all this thing. So that motivated me, and because being a follower of Baba Sahib, he studied from Columbia and LSE. He did 2 to 3 PhDs, and so all these factors motivated me, and today I am here.
You followed in his footsteps.
One thing I would like to share here is that upon coming in contact with Triratna, I became like global citizen. I have many friends and I started learning Spanish. I'm learning French also because of Triratna. I made many friends from Mexico, and I connected with Mexican sangha as well. I know a little bit Spanish, so tengo muchas amigos. So this is all because of Triratna and Baba Sahib. Because otherwise, I used to believe that I can't do anything. I born in a particular community, and there is a dominance still there. So you are not you. First, I myself used to think that I can't do anything because of the environment, and I wasn't aware about my capabilities, my potential.
The fact that we're here together on this stage, just as brothers really in the sangha, I feel like this is proof that what Dr. Ambedkar saw has become a reality. It seems so unlikely to me that you two guys, from the other side of the world, from such different kind of social communities, can now just be here sitting in the same room having this conversation, part of the same community. And I think, that is what unity looks like. And it's thanks to, you've got a vision for yourself that you believe in and that you can act on and that you are acting on. And that's what brings us here together now. It's amazing.
Again, thank you very much for listening to me. I apologize for my poor pronunciation sometimes, or I'm in learning phase. I'm learning. It's been 3 months here, and I deeply grateful to you, Viryananda, and you lovely people, Sangha. And of course, I can't forget it. It is because of his wonderful sangha, and he collected the essence of Buddhism, just like Baba Sahib wrote Buddha and his Dharma in his book. He collected all the essence of Buddhism from all the different branches. In the just way, I was like, sorry, I lost in between. So I was in search of Buddhism, particular, which satisfy me, where I can study all the branches. And I feel lucky that I got Triratna. It is our Sangha. The beauty of Sangha is it practices and all the beautiful things of Buddhism, from all the branches. Like the Sangharakshita character. And I really inspired by the event, like Sangharakshita. When he was in India, he tore his passport.
He burned his passport.
So his dedication towards Dharma, which really inspired me. Still, I am reading his literature, Taste of Freedom. So it's really motivated me.
There's so much more that we could say.
And lot to say, but I'm not sure what I'm saying. Sometimes
Well, we've definitely overrun our slot for this afternoon. But thankfully, you're not going away anytime soon. So I really encourage all of you just to come and chat to my friends, and there's so much more to hear. But now we have a chai break. Anna has made some chai, so let's go for that, and then we'll come back up and we'll hear some more stories from other perspectives. So to be continued. So there'll be a bell in about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back up.
Fine. So I'm just going to introduce this part of the afternoon, and then after that we are going to finish with a ritual. So I feel actually, I probably say this quite a lot, but this time I really mean it. I usually mean it. I really mean it. I'm actually really, really honoured to be introducing Shanker and Vidya. And I think it's amazing that at the moment in the Sangha, we have these 4 people who come from actually very different backgrounds in India, and yet they've come here in Sheffield and they're practicing the Dharma with us. It's quite extraordinary, really. And both Vidya and Shanker are very accomplished people, and it's fun. I find it actually gives me faith that they want to practice in our Sangha. It's really inspiring to me and makes me, even more want to practice in our Sangha. So I'm just going to very briefly introduce them, and then they're going to just interview each other. Okay. So, Shanker was born and grew up in a rural village in Pakistan. And he was born into a Hindu community in Pakistan, and he found himself on the wrong side of the Hindu caste system. He was born into the Dalit community, which we've heard a lot about, the untouchable community. And because of Shanker's surname, which indicates his caste, he was twice rejected from university, even though he had the grades. And he was finally accepted after applying for the 3rd time. And at first, he decided when he did get to university not to use his surname. But he didn't want people to know about his caste and have to experience the effect of that. But all this changed when he heard about Dr Ambedkar. I think he'd heard about him a little bit more, but he read about him more at university. So he began to use his surname, and when colleagues found out about his caste, that they didn't want to sit with him or talk to him. But he was inspired by the example of Dr Ambedkar, and he thought, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to carry on. And he was no longer ashamed of his name and his community. And he bought himself a copy of a book by Dr Ambedkar, which is called The Annihilation of Caste, and some other books about Buddhism from the internet. And actually, this was a really dangerous thing to do at that time in Pakistan. Shanker was telling me how the student hostels would be raided by the police to see what people were reading. So he was taking quite a risk when he did that. And again, he found himself discriminated against, even though he did really well. He couldn't get a job because of his caste. So eventually he moved to the UK in 2018 to study for a PhD. And he won prestigious scholarships to allow him to come here. And then he came along to the intro course, became a mitra, and he's currently doing a postdoc and living here in Sheffield with his wife and child. So I first met him on this newcomers course, just really impressed with his integrity, actually, and he was really asking lots of questions, really trying to find out what it was about. And it was interesting because I think you came here to meditate, didn't you? Learn to meditate. You didn't know the connection that Triratna has with Ambedkar, even though you'd actually come across Ambedkar independently. And we also ran a newcomers course together. We were on the team for that together. And I was just so enjoyed your positivity and your real willingness to serve, to do what was needed every week. It was great. So great that you're here, Shanker.
Thank you.
And Vidya. So Vidya is a social science researcher. He's working with a university in the UK. And he did his intro course here at the centre in 2015. And has been an active member ever since then. At times he's gone back to India, but luckily he's always come back. And it was in 2018 that he met Shanker. So Vidya comes from a very different part of the caste system. He comes from the Brahmin caste system, and he grew up in Rajasthan. And as part of his upbringing, he was conditioned, both subtle and obvious ways, not to behave the way that lower caste people would. And that's lots of different ways that happened. But for instance, his grandmother used to tell him off for eating food with other people from different castes and having friendships with people from different castes. But Vidya never took that very seriously and tried to challenge it at all times through his friendships with people from different castes. And later on, he chose to become an Ambedkarite and did a PhD on urban poor, caste and public housing. So he currently lives in the men's community, and he's such a lovely member of the Sangha, so warm, so great that he's here in Sheffield. He also told me that he did, for his time, work as a speechwriter for a minister.
For the Minister of Housing in India.
So, and then he's written my speech, which is... So, I'm just going to read you this beautiful thing that Vidya wrote. So, he said, Shanker and Vidya are divided by national boundaries, divided by the great Indian Thar Desert, and most significant of all, divided by their caste upbringing. But they are united in their common dislike for the arbitrary social divisions, discrimination, blindfolded acceptance of the social norms, united also in their love and reverence for the three jewels, and in their deep friendship and care for each other.
I don't know if I'm audible enough. Yeah, it's good. Okay. So, hello Shankar, and hello Sangha members. Namo Buddhaya and Jai Bhim. Jai Bhim. So, with a profound sense of gratitude and reverence towards my teachers, some of them are sitting here, and love for Sangha, I would like to start this afternoon by through a series of chronological events of our lives. But I would just also want to take this moment and opportunity to rejoice in Shankar's marriage. Shankar, I want to rejoice in your capacity to overcome all the challenges in life with a gracious heart. And some of this you'll come to know when he'll talk about his own upbringing in his caste and his encounters with Dr. Ambedkar. But what may not become obvious is his capacity to overcome all the bitterness that one can have or can cultivate through some bad encounters or bad experiences with love and dignity. So I rejoice in that in you. I also want to rejoice in your compassionate and caring heart. His initiation into veganism happened with the feeling of love for all beings. It's not just a culture follower or a cult, joining veganism now you come to England and, do something. But love and care for all beings. And I caught, just the way we catch Dharma, I caught veganism from him. Also came very, very strongly when I went back to India for 2 years between 2021 and 23. And every now and then we would do online meetings, and he would check on me, and what came across was his care and love for me. So I want to rejoice in that. And lastly, and this is maybe a bit, not obvious, but I think when you hear his account and my account and the culture which will come across through those accounts, it would make a lot of sense. And I want to rejoice in his rational thinking. I'm highlighting this when, as I said, hearing his own accounts. But specifically, what is also important is that you can have access to education, but you may not be able to develop critical thinking skills. Important also because the culture and norms we grow up in, Dinesh, Shubham, Shankar, and myself, it's hard to challenge them and to be able to distance from them. And I think that I want to rejoice in that also in you. You are a truly wonderful person, Shankar, and I'm delighted to have you as my friend. And I also want to thank Sheffield Buddhist Center for making this happen for me. So thank you. Coming back to the business. So what we thought, we are friends since about 6 years now. I met him in 2018 during his intro course, and I remember I think I was serving him tea, and I saw somebody said, "Oh, there's another Indian member," and I thought might be the one. And I said, "Well, where are you from in India?" And he said, "No, Janab, I'm not from India. I'm from Pakistan." And for the next 5 minutes, I was awestruck, and I said, "No, it cannot happen." Shankar from Pakistan. So we thought of running it through a series of chronological events. Firstly, about talking about our own reflections of growing up in our own caste, and then we move on to talking about our encounters with Dr. Ambedkar, and then eventually we'll talk about our Dharma life and how are we connected with Dr. Ambedkar now. So, if you'd like to get started with that, Shankar, just a little bit about where you grew up, what was it like growing up in your caste, and some images that might have stayed in your mind of growing up in that caste you'd like to share.
Thank you, Vidya. It was so nice. Yes, it's been amazing to be with you, to be honest. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I'll start with my village. That's where I born and grown. So I was born and raised in Samal village in Pakistan. This is the southeast side of the Pakistan. So village called Chahu Jese Jithani. So Jesaram is name of my father, grandfather. So this is how this village is named as well. So imagine, so my village or home district, actually, this is district Tharparkar, that's where my home, this Saman village is. So we share border with India from eastern side with the state of yours, Rajasthan, and then Gujarat. So yeah, that's where we share the border, and from south side it's the Arabian Sea. So basically, there are very few villages in Pakistan which has all the predominantly Hindu population. So that one of them is my village. We all of the Hindus in that village. But predominantly they are not just Hindus as in the sense, but there are different caste people, and majority is scheduled caste, or we can call it Dalit in that community. And I born to the parents of Dalit family. So now let me tell you the geography of the village, how this village is being there. So imagine, the four direction, southeast and northwest. So this village out there, I don't know how long that village been there, but untouchables are, they are kept on one side. So the reason being is in summer specifically, wind blows in that area from west to east, and in the winter it from north to south. So that's how it usually been the wind blow. So we untouchable kept on the southeast side of the town. So that, and then upper caste people, they are from northwest side. So wind always blows from them toward us, not from us toward them. So it's because of fear of pollution. They don't want even air to pollute them, So this is why we are not allowed to go on their sides to acquire the property or even visit their community. So the community out there, they call them as a Chahu Sutar. Sutar is one of the community from upper caste, but they call, I think it's from Shudras community. Yes. But they do discriminate untouchable people based on that system. And so this is how the geography of the village is. And regarding my education, I'm the first generation learner from that community, to be honest. And my parents never went to a school. They never had a education. So I'm the first one from my parents, and in fact, from the entire village, I'm lucky to go to the university. That's the first from the village. Although there were 3 primary schools in the sides of the upper caste people, we had one school. Although we were in the majority, but we had only one school, and then upper caste they had 3 schools, and we were not allowed there to study in that schools. The reason again being because they were predominantly from upper caste and they had fear of the pollution, so they never allowed us to go to their schools. And then, so what happened at one point is our school was closed, and then my grandfather went to the government offices in the home district. So, and those officers are usually coming from Muslim community. They are feudal lords. So he asked them, can you please allow us to, or give somehow some direction or order to those people of the caste so that they can our children to be enrolled in that schools. So then, because of their sanctioning, the feudal law sanctioned, with the letter in order that allow these children to be enrolled in the school. So this is only year 1998. So can you imagine that is, we talked about Ambedkar in 1950, but this is happening. It's very, very recent. But discrimination didn't end there. So we were allowed to sit on the floor, not on the benches. We were not allowed to drink water from the tank, which were for the school, but we were not allowed to drink water from there. And teacher wouldn't touch our copies or books. Again, the fear of the pollution that they will bring us. So we'll keep it on the one side, and we never allowed to have friends with the upper caste people. So we always kept away from them, and they were never allowed to mingle with us or like have a friendship with us. So yeah, this is really it. Like this is how I grown up there and got my primary education over there. So Vidya, if you allow me, I'll share one more experience of my strong image from which is related with the drinking water. So what happened? I was almost a 7-year-old or so. I broke my left arm playing with siblings somehow, and there's no medical facility available in the village. So we have to travel to the city. So my father took me from village to a city for medical treatment, and we stayed there for some time. Then we were referred from that city to another city for the medical treatment. So we were traveling by bus. It was a summer time again. And as Shubham mentioned, there's very hot there in summer. So temperature, specifically Rajasthan and that region, goes to up to 50 degrees Celsius, just scorching heat. And you can't keep water in bottle all the time because it gets hot and you can't drink it. So what happens is usually bus stops after 30 minutes or so that you can get off the bus and then drink water from the communal tanks. So at one stop, bus stopped, and then I was thirsty. I asked my father, "Can I have water, please?" So then I didn't know that we are not allowed to drink water. So he hesitated and went to the water tank, and there was a person who was serving water to the passengers. And then he asked hesitated that, "Can I have water?" Then they said, "What's your cost is?" The first thing, they didn't offer the water. They asked first, "What's your cost?" And he was hesitant. If he would tell them real cost, they won't offer him a water, whatever the reason. So he lied actually. He said, I'm Sudar, which comes from the upper caste. I was looking at my father, and he lied, and then he got water. I drank water. I remember now the reason being because my father was very strict in a sense, like he used to teach us that be honest, don't tell a lie, but he lied himself. So I knew that why he lied, because again, I was a 7-year-old, but not that much understanding of that system. But I knew because if he wouldn't have lied that time, we wouldn't have water. So yeah, it was really a strong, image that is really stuck in my mind.
Yeah. And when I heard this first time from you, must have been a long time ago, and what really stayed in my mind, or the image that conjured up in my mind, was about the encounter between Prakriti and Ananda. Actually, I heard this from you pretty a long time ago, and the encounter goes like this: that Ananda, the attendant, long-time attendant of the Buddha, the Blessed One, is sent for an important mission, and when upon returning, he notices a well, and there was a lady coming from untouchable caste, and he reaches out to her and asks for water from her. And the lady replies to him, "O nobly born, O holy monk, I am from the untouchable caste, and I cannot serve you water lest your holiness be contaminated." And upon that, hearing that kind of response from Prakriti, Ananta gently and politely asked, "Lady, I didn't ask for your caste, I asked for water." And even though these are seemingly opposite accounts, but I think they really connect and say something about the discrimination, separated also in between 2,500 years of time or so, but really speak of the discrimination and the oppression and prohibitions that caste Hindus have been committing on the other non-caste Hindus, primarily the Dalits. Any other image that has stayed in your mind, Shankar, if you would like to share that?
Yeah, sure. So that's really inspirational story. I was thinking about 2,500 years and just thinking about 1998. This is really so moving. So yes, definitely. After my primary education, my father sent me to city to get higher education, and that was the first time happened ever in the village, and everybody opposed. Again, the reason was clear that if they send us to the cities, we will be more discriminated, and there was no other person who can look after us. But my father took a bold decision. He sent me to a city to get education, and I feel today like I was lucky among all those children in the village who got that opportunity to go to the city and get further education. So when I went to the city, I had a big exposure. The boy who never been in a city before. So I was like amazed to see all those infrastructure, vehicles. That was first time I see those 7 cars and roads on there. It has a really profound impact on me. And then the first thing which I did, I hide my caste that time, as Satyajyoti said. But that later on, I just removed that thing. But the first thing I did, because I don't want it to be double discriminated there, because I knew from my experience that in village, Hindus, upper caste Hindus, they were discriminating us. But those Muslim community, in some villages, the Muslims are living with Hindus. When they knew it, that caste system is being practiced and these peoples are discriminated, then they started discriminating as well. So I was surprised that why you people, you don't have that relation. So that's why, because in the cities, the majority is a Muslim. So I just hide my caste. That's the reason. But the good thing happened is like many of those Muslims didn't knew about the caste system. Those who stayed in the rural areas or villages with the Hindus, they knew, but most of them they didn't knew it. They consider Hindus as equal. They are just Hindu. They don't know about that hierarchy, which was good for me. That at least they don't know. So I didn't want to tell them, so that again fear of the discrimination. Double discrimination, definitely, from the Hindu caste and then from the Muslim community. Yeah. So on that, Vidya, is really that's what my strong image is. I still remember from my childhood. So what do you think about what your personal account being on that strong images?
I have few commonalities, but of course, being brought up in a completely different, completely opposite end of the spectrum, I would say, in terms of caste upbringing. Some similarities in the sense that I also first teenage year, I would say first few years until my early teenage, I was in village. I wasn't really sure if I was in a village or a city because my father would keep moving from town to the village often, and I would tag along. I think my experience of being raised in my caste was actually observing discrimination being happening on others. And so, as Shankar pointed out, there's a difference between how this happens in the villages and how it actually pans out in the cities. City somehow offers some sort of anonymity, which is not possible in village society. And I saw how discrimination happens, and I must have been 5 or 6. So the ritual was like everybody would help work as a help, for the house, for the field. And so my aunt would ask me to come along and help her out in fetching water from the village well. And we had one well, and I mean, it's still talking about Rajasthan and Sindh, primarily very sort of desert-like climate. So water is scarce. Having only one village meant that both Dalit and the non-Dalit would fetch water from the same village. But what was striking for me was seeing some women fetching water during the afternoon time, peak of the summers. I mean, Shankar mentioned 50 degrees Celsius, and there was strong warning for kids also: don't go out, don't play. And as kids, you would sneak out. You always want to challenge. And I would go around and see some women fetching water during the daytime, which was something that we didn't practice as a ritual in the household. And then once this happened, that I politely asked my aunt, so why is this that some women come and fetch water during the afternoon time, and why are we fetching water during the evening? And they say my aunt's reply was very standard in the sense that a Brahmin family would give a standard reply to their kids in the form of conditioning, and the conditioning was, son, they are from low caste, and their shadow should not fall upon us. And if you're moving around during the daytime, shadows would be shorter. And if you're moving around in the evening time, shadows might be longer. And if their shadow casts upon us, then we would be polluted. She didn't, of course, she didn't give this elaborate explanation, but her explanation was very simple. They are from low caste. But then I also was very curious, as I have always been, and I asked, but why is it so that we are fetching the water from the same well that is being, used by the other caste people also? Isn't the water get polluted itself? And she, of course, obviously didn't have any answer to that question. This was me, being 5-year-old. I also did notice how even very lovely people, you can see that 5, 6, 7-year-old, you can start seeing people and figuring out, oh, these are really lovely people, and they were discriminated in very many ways. I mean, the image that stayed in my heart was seeing people made to sit where you leave your shoes. And the strict sort of sanction was that you should not move beyond that point. And I'm talking about people coming from Dalit caste. So being raised in a Brahmin family, people would visit for some affairs. But those who were coming from the lower caste, so-called lower caste, were made to sit where you leave your shoes. And I would always, I would have questions there. I would have a sort of emotional response to that. What is happening here, and why are so lovely people not allowed to come and sit on a bench? So that was another strong account that stayed in my mind. The last one I would want to say was about when I became an adult and moved down to Jodhpur, which is another city very near to your place, Shankar. And I happened to live with my uncle, but also my grandmother used to live with us. So my grandmother was very strict in caste conditioning. So I had friends from, and again, reference to that can be given to Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar was also the first lawmaker for India. So he came out with some positive affirmations for the upliftment of the downtrodden. And so what he also did, we haven't talked about this, is that he came out with the idea of reservations for people who coming from depressed classes, scheduled caste, in education, in jobs. So as a result of that, when I did my undergrad, I came across many people who are coming from not so privileged caste backgrounds, and as it would be my way of attending my friends. I would invite them over and have lunch with them sometimes. And my grandmother would get furious at me. First things first, she would ask, "What is your caste?" to my friends, which was quite embarrassing, to be honest. And later on, she would scold me that how can you, being a Brahmin, coming from a Brahmin family, eating food in the same plate with a Dalit caste or a Shudra? You are not a Brahmin. And this will go on for a week at least. So that's the kind of image that
it's really strong. So when I was reflecting what you said, as a kid, when I was growing up in the village, we were not allowed to mingle with the upper caste people, and they were not allowed so as to play with us or even have a friendship with us. So I was like, they were strongly conditioned in that sort of the environment. So I was just thinking, how does it become possible for you to coming out of that, Brahminical sort of conditioning? Because I'm just assuming it must be a strong conditioning out there. So how
Yes.
that happened? How you come out of that sort of conditioning?
Yes, it is an important question. I don't have, unfortunately, a strong answer to that. I can say mysteriously. I can also say there was a heart's response to such conditioning early on. Intellectually, I figured this out maybe through my interest in social sciences when I started reading more about caste hierarchy, the social stratification. I figured out, oh, some of this is actually not making sense. But also being raised in Brahminical way of upbringing, as you said. I think some of the things like superstition, beliefs, false beliefs, I would say, never strike a chord with me. So I suppose there was a process that initiated very early on for me. And then when I became a Mitra in 2018, I gave up my Hindu affiliation. So that was a strong sort of moment for me to just make a point for myself that this is enough for me, and I don't think I belong to Hinduism at all. So So yeah.
Thank you, Vidya. Should we move on to the second session now, please?
Yes. Yes. Thank you for the prompt. So, if you move on to our second theme, which is about our encounters with Dr. Ambedkar, Shankar, would you like to say something about that? How did that happen in your case? When did that happen, and what impression did it leave on you?
I think I must have. I'm not sure when I was in my secondary school. That's when I heard about Dr. Ambedkar from word of mouth. From my Dalit community. So they said like Dr. Ambedkar belongs to us, untouchables, and he wrote the Indian Constitution. I think that was the first thing I heard about Dr. Ambedkar. But the first time I read about Ambedkar was in 2014, as when I was in university as Satyajyoti mentioned. Before there was no available of literature, even though I was interested in it. But because of that sanctioning of revolutionary literature that time in early 80s or 90s by the military regime in Pakistan, they won't allow to read any revolutionary literature. So that was the reason I didn't able to read. But in 2014, when I was doing my master's in Viryananda University after finishing, that's when I had access to internet and I downloaded his book on Annihilation of Caste. That's the first book I read about Dr. Ambedkar, 2014. I just read in one sitting. It was so amazing and it was so moving that what's the reality? He told about the caste system, about the true face of Mahatma Gandhi. To be honest, I was considering him as a hero. To be honest, before I said no, this is completely hell. The way he considered sort of the society. So it was really amazing. And then regularly I started reading about Dr. Ambedkar. So the first impression of him on me was like as a social reformer. I didn't knew his religious perspective, but as a social reformer. And that was important for me, again, as the first point, because I'm, again, belongs to the same community. So he became my ideal, to be honest, and hero who really fought for the rights of the marginalized communities and their dignity specifically, I would say, because they were like self-respect and dignity. I didn't have mine unless I read the Ambedkar, to be honest. So on the specific account of Dr. Ambedkar, I'm going to mention here as that when Dr. Ambedkar came back after having his doctorate from USA and London School of Economics, when he was serving in the Baroda Strait.
Royal
family up there. So he was in the office and he was refused by his office attendant to give him a water or even take files from him. Again, the fear of the pollution, which was like left a big impression on me in a sense like, see, he is the person who has the capability and you are judging this person based on his cost. This is ridiculous. But then he, vowed that day or that time that he will make sure he will dedicate his life to, to eradicate this sort of the evils, untouchability, and this sort of the things in the society. So it really left me a big impression on me because whenever I am treated unfairly or discriminated based on my caste, I just remember this account of Dr. Ambedkar and really boost my motivation. I say, like, whatever you say, it doesn't matter to me. So that's when in 2014, I started writing my caste with my name. I say, I don't care anymore. So whatever you say it. I don't care anymore. So that's really had a big impression on me from Dr. Ambedkar. So what about you? How did you encounter with Dr. Ambedkar at the first time?
My encounters with Dr. Ambedkar again happened during my higher education. So as I mentioned briefly, I took some serious interest in social sciences, and I think what did strike in between me and him was that the problems, the challenges that I was coming across in my social science study, and what I really struck for me that he was dealing those challenges head on, or he dealt. At least he did some initiation for that heads on back in the 50s and 60s. So that was my first impression that Ambedkar left on me as a social reformer again, as you said. I was also aware of his big role in writing the Indian Constitution and his opposition to International Congress and Mahatma Gandhi. Well, we should stop saying him Mahatma, actually. It's just Gandhi, Mr. Gandhi, for their interests or for their sort of I wouldn't say interest, for their belief that they want to carry on the caste discrimination as it has been for ages, for centuries in India. So Dr. Ambedkar had a strong opposition to that, and I was aware of that during my studies, and also particularly when I did my PhD. And as Satyajyoti mentioned, that was the time when I discovered myself, my identity as an Ambedkarite researcher. There's a specific category of researchers who affiliate themselves as Ambedkarites and want to carry forward the legacy of, in some sense, but work that Dr. Ambedkar left. And so I ended up finding myself in a community near, two communities near Mumbai. One of them was predominantly caste, Dalit caste Hindus, and the other one was non-caste, or I would say non-Dalit. So what really struck in me was that how this community, Dalit community, saw it with what reverence they saw Dr. Ambedkar. That really stayed in my heart. And how his call, his call of educating, agitating, and organizing, they really took it seriously. And that also became a point of interest for my research because, as I was mentioning this to you, Shankar, you coming from Pakistan and having some idea of how public sector operates.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, particularly saying about the public housing that these people were fighting for. So they organized, they educated themselves about their rights. They organized and they agitated about why is it so that they are not getting housing allocation in time. So this was very impressive in their case, and that became a part of my case study in my PhD, and I developed a strong interest in Dr. Ambedkar's work. But again, his Dharma side was still not very clear to me, very obvious to me back then. I must also mention this was the time when I was doing my introductory course and going backwards and forwards in India and back to England. This encounter between me and Bodhinaga, he's seeing me. And when I express this, I'm doing this research on India, and I say, hey, I want to gift you this book, which is Ambedkar and Buddhism. Oh, that's not the same book, actually. This is the copy from the library, but he gifted me that book, which left a profound impression on me. A little bit of that will come up in our next theme. But I just wanted to say that up until then, my interaction with Dr. Ambedkar's work was more on a social science research basis, a political figure, a reformer, but his Dharma side was still not very obvious to me back then.
Yeah.
So shall we move on to the theme, which is about our Dharma life and building a deeper connection with Dr. Ambedkar. Would you like to say a little bit about how did you end up being at the Buddhist Center? When did that happen, and what is your connection with Dr. Ambedkar now?
Thank you, Vidya. Satyajyoti has already mentioned about that, so I'll give you a brief of that one again. So I came to Sheffield Buddhist Center in 2018. So the first time when I came to UK and Sheffield for my PhD studies. So I was looking for meditation that time. I was doing meditation before, but I just wanted to learn properly. So I just Googled, is there a meditation center in Sheffield? That's where I found the Sheffield Buddhist Center. And there was an introductory course. If you're interested in meditation, just register. And then I signed up for that course, and I just appeared on the day. And Satyajyoti and Bodhinaga was leading that introductory course, and I appeared there. And I think the teaching team mentioned that Buddha, we consider Buddha as a human being like us, and he's not a god. I said, what? That really struck me. Before it was like he was considered as a god in my mind, because that's how we were told. So and then I had lots of questions that time to know about, because it was really interesting that he said like it's not we don't consider him as a god, but as a human being like us. But I had lots of questions. So, and then the team, Satyajyoti, Bodhinaga, they really patiently listened to my question and replied to my questions. Some of them questions, if they were not sure about, they will directly tell me, okay, we are not sure about those things. I would say, yeah, really? When a religious teacher, they either knew the answer or they make up the answer. From my experience, to be honest, they say like, yeah, we know everything. So that was like, yeah, oh my God. So it really left me a big impression on me. And then also when I came here, everybody was welcoming. And that was the first time ever in my life, nobody asked my caste. I say, well, okay. So they are not bothered about my caste. So it really, it feels me like I belongs to here, this is my like family. So nobody ever asked, that sort of the background, or nobody sort of the discriminated the way I was discriminated, to be honest. So that's how I became the integral part of the Sangha then, because I took introductory course and then say like, yeah, this is how I want to practice Buddhism. So I become the part of it. And in terms of the, Buddhism and Ambedkar, because I was not aware of his Buddhism perspective, Dr. Ambedkar's Buddhism perspective, until very recently when I read again the same book, Ambedkar and Buddhism, which earlier didn't appeal to me in a sense. I thought like he embraced Buddhism is his personal choice, was not something, but because I was not aware of that thing. When I read this book, I think, yeah, it was for a reason. So really, when I was reading this book, it really blew my mind in the sense like the way Dr. Ambedkar was considering the comparative analysis of big religions like Christianity, Hinduism, and Hinduism, and sort of, and then he saw the inequalities in those fundamental inequality on those religions, and then self-declaration of God either or the messenger of God, like these sort of the things, and he was very critical on those sort of things. And specifically when he did a critical review on the Buddha and Karl Marx, and then Buddhism and modern world, and why modern world should take Buddhism as a religion if somebody wants to. It was really left me a profound impact, that how like he considered Buddhism as a man thing. Because for him, when he took a mass conversion happened, because when I was reading this book, he don't want to take a sangha, because we usually took the three refuge as to the Buddha's Dharma and the Sangha. He don't wanted to take a refuge in Sangha, because the way Sangha was practiced in traditional Buddhist country back in India or some other country, he said like, this is not a Sangha, we should practice Sangha. So it really was, he has a critical analysis of that sort of, the way it was practiced. I think it had the same, my values as well, like this is how I see the things as well. This really left me a good impression of him, of this spiritual side, because from my own perspective, I consider religion as a deal. You just sign it, and then you just blindly follow it. Don't need to ask a question. But then from a spirituality perspective, I would say it's a more journey. You have to experience it. You have to follow the path. You have to investigate, and that's how you'll see the reality of things. So that's really left a big impression from Ambedkar's perspective of the Buddhism. And I'm still learning about his side of the Buddhism. And so that's really my first impression of him. And how did that happen to you then?
Yeah, so in my case, I'll just be very brief in this. So as Satyajyoti briefly mentioned, I had my introductory in 2015, became a minister in 2018. In between, I was everywhere, but I was also listening to the commentaries on Dhammapada. So there was that actually brought me back to Buddhism, and I decided that I want to give up my Hindu affiliation, and Buddhism is the real deal for me. Went on from there on. I've been a part of an active member of Sangha, and I live in the men's community. So my faith, my shraddha in Buddhism, in the three jewels has grown in many folds. But specifically about Dr. Ambedkar, up until I didn't read this, but when I read this, as you mentioned, Shankar, specifically on his interactions with Bhante Sangharakshita was something that was of keen interest to me. And what we come to enjoy here is, Sangha, spiritual community. The seed of that actually, I think, must have come from Dr. Ambedkar, because of his own survey of Buddhism for about 8 years. He was, as Shankar mentioned, looking into various religions, but also he was looking at Buddhism very critically. And he found out the way it was practiced back then, at least in some countries in East Asia, in a very idolatrous way, in a very people are a bunch of idlers who are seeking some states of higher states of mind for the sake of their own, the Hinayana version of Buddhism, to be frank. And so also he was very critical about the difference between the laity and the monk. And so I think my connection with Dr. Ambedkar is very sincere and deep now, which wasn't there until I read this book. But I think what I really want to highlight here is that what I'm enjoying right now through Sangha, through men's community, all of this I owe this to Dr. Ambedkar. The idea of this having come from Dr. Ambedkar to Bhante Sangrakshita and their own to benefiting us. So that's my connection.
Surely their encounter and their having meeting before he converted. So definitely they had left a big impression on Bhante Sangrakshita.
Yes,
definitely.
that's right.
So thank you, Vidya. We are almost at the end. We took a little bit more time. So let's conclude the session.
Yes.
So how would you want to conclude what we say about this?
Yes, I did a bit of thinking on this. So I thought, as we have also listened from Shubham's and Dinesh's account and yours, Shankar, I believe that Buddhism should not just remain as a religion of untouchable. So I'm just talking about where Dr. Ambedkar left his work and the scope for us, for me in person. I'm just thinking out loud for myself here. Should not just remain as a religion of the untouchable. Baba Sahib himself expressed the desire, and he wanted all caste Hindus to embrace Buddhism. As for the achievement of liberty, equality, and fraternity in the society, we would need all the people being a part of the same stream. In other words, their moral compass being oriented to the same north, which is the Buddha Dharma. That's my concluding comment. And you?
Thank you. Sure. So, we talked all this historical events which happened in India, and specifically in terms of the untouchability. So, if we talk about today's, this modern time, and specifically in terms of the society, so I think this Ambedkar Day should be the reminder for all of us in a way, like we or the society is also divided into a different sort of the layers, if we say the gender basis or these are the different kind of the ethnic deviance, in racism or gender divide or sexual affiliation. These are the modern time of the deviance in the society. So I think this is more relevant to the society, the work or the hard work Ambedkar did, to be honest. So it's more relevant, and we should consider, like, his vision was not to just blindly follow the Buddhism in a way what was written. We have to see the critical in a way that what is needed in the current time, in a way to have more prosperous society in terms of the Sangha community. I think it's very important, which we can grow together as a spiritual community in the Sangha. That's very much needed.
To carry forward the legacy.
Yes, forward the legacy and his vision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Jai Bhim.
Thank you, Shankar. Yes, definitely. Taking my mic off, I can hold it. So what we also thought that we would like to end this session, but probably just mark an end to the day with the 4 lines from the Karanyametta Sutta, and which are very, very fitting for the today's event. So maybe we can take a couple of seconds to just arrive in our bodies and just still ourselves and close our eyes if you'd like. May no one deceive or look down on another. May no one be angry with another. May no one react to another. May no one want another to suffer. May no one deceive or look down on another. May no one be angry with another. May no one react to another. May no one want another to suffer. Jai Bhim.
So, in a minute, we're going to have a short break, a chance to have a leg stretch, just that. And also, if it's a bit later than you thought it might be, just please feel free to leave if you need to. I think we'll probably be another 25, 30 minutes after this. And before I just thank you again, I just wanted to say something very briefly. Shanker mentioned gender. And it just so happens that we happen to have everybody who's been up here today from India and Pakistan is a man. However, I just really wanted briefly to say that Dr. Ambedkar was very, he was quite a forward thinker about women's rights. And he has a wonderful, he says, I measure the progress of a community with the degree of progress women have achieved. And I won't say much about it, but he did a lot of work in the constitution to try and get rights for women through all the different castes in India. And also, just in my experience of the women from the Triratna community, they're amazing. They're amazing. Women taking leadership roles, women, really doing amazing things. So I'll just leave it at that because we haven't got much time. But just in case it looked like this was just a Dharma revolution for 50%. That really isn't the case. Let's just have a round of applause for all four of our speakers. Fantastic.